Today, I'd like to talk about the Massachusetts Mandatory Real Estate Licensee Consumer Relationship Disclosure. This is what the disclosure looks like. I'm going to review it with you and just go over the topics that it discusses. This is actually not a contract. It is a mandatory disclosure. Mandatory meaning that as a real estate licensee in the state of Massachusetts, I do have to provide this to any consumer that I talk to about a specific property. Let's dive in. One of the things that you should know about working in the real estate sphere is that most of the information for consumers is actually widely available because the states really want the consumer to be protected when they're buying and selling real estate. Buying a home, selling a home, that is one of the biggest assets that a person will own in their lifetime. And so it's also heavily litigated. That's why the state likes to protect the consumer. So if you look at this disclosure, the first thing it tells you is when should you receive it? You should receive this disclosure as soon as a real estate licensee is talking with you about a specific property. And if your relationship changes, then you have to get another disclosure at that time. Okay. This next paragraph talks about consumer information and responsibility. You can hire a real estate license agent to help you when you're buying or selling and to represent you as your agent, just like you would hire an attorney to represent you. We aren't licensed attorneys, but we are licensed to specialize in buying and selling real estate. You should know, though, that while we do have duties that are to help you and provide you with a fiduciary relationship, you still are responsible to protect your own interests. So this is the buyer beware section. Real estate agents, especially really good real estate agents, should talk to you about different ways you can protect yourself from liability, avoid any issues, especially obviously we want to avoid issues of a criminal intent. So we're here to work with you on that. We learn a lot in the process, not only of getting our license, but also through continuing education every year. However, when you're looking at a specific property, you should really do your due diligence above and beyond that of your real estate agent. We are the source of the source. So more often than not, if you have a question, if we can't answer it, it's because we are going to send you to a direct source of someone who will provide you with that correct information, whether that is an inspector, someone who works for the city, county, an attorney, a tax consultant, things like that. So that's what this paragraph is talking about. This next section is to inform you of whether you're a seller or buyer, who the real estate agent is working for. Okay, so is the agent a seller's agent, a buyer's agent, or are they a facilitator? Let's take an example. So let's say that someone calls and wants specific information on my listing where I represent the seller. When I am giving them information, I will send them this form with the checked box that I am the seller's agent. Okay, and then what type of agency I have. So we're looking at either non-designated agency or designated agency. So if you're a consumer and you're working with a listing agent who represents the seller, you're going to receive a form that's going to tell you it's non-designated agency. Everybody in the real estate brokerage represents the seller. You do not have an agreement for representation with anyone that represents that seller. So when you are talking to someone who is representing a listing, they do not represent you. I think that's very important to know. Designated agency, in this case, the person on the form is representing potentially the seller or the buyer, and all other agents affiliated with this brokerage don't represent you, and they may represent another party in the real estate transaction. So this form is for consumers. They have zero representation. And we're just letting you know, this form is to let you know that we don't represent you. Okay. And who else in our firm or real estate brokerage, for example, I work for Real Brokerage, represents. Okay, so you're going to sign this. It's not a contract. You're only signing that you've received it. That is why you sign it, and it will have the date. The next page actually gives you the definition of the types of agency. So a seller's agent, this talks about that a seller can engage a real estate agent to represent them in the sale of their property. What that means is when you are talking with the listing agent of a property, they owe the seller undivided loyalty, reasonable care, disclosure, obedience, and lawful instruction, confidentiality, and accounting. These are the fiduciary duties that all real estate agents have, whether they're working with a seller or a buyer. So this is under both seller's agent and buyer's agent. What this means is if you're in an open house and you're talking with an agent, could be the listing agent or someone from their brokerage, they represent the seller. They owe them disclosure. What that means is if you're in the open house and you say, oh, I love this house, I would pay $50,000 over asking in order to get it, they will tell the seller that you said that. So you do want to be careful when you're going in and out of open houses because that is their duty to their seller. Now, if you are working with a buyer's agent and you go into an open house and the agent in the open house tells your buyer's agent that the seller is willing to take less than asking on the house, the buyer's agent is required to tell you. And that agent in the open house might have violated their trust with the seller. Usually in those types of situations, they need to have something in writing from the seller that they're willing to disclose, that they are allowed to disclose that the seller is negotiable on the asking price. Let's talk about a facilitator. A facilitator is when a licensee is working with a seller and a buyer, but they don't represent either party. So the facilitator doesn't owe anybody any of those additional duties, fiduciary duties. So they can't give anyone confidentiality. So when in the situation with a designated seller and buyer's agent, this could be a situation where you have two real estate agents working in the same brokerage. So perhaps you have gone to an open house and you met an agent at the open house, you really liked them, and they are from the same brokerage as the listing agent, but they are not the listing agent. In this case, the brokerage, for example, we'll use my company, Real Brokerage, can assign another agent to represent you. Let's say that I, Sarah, am representing the seller, and I had my friend Mike hold open my listing, and you met Mike at the open house and you built a connection with him and you decided that you wanted to write an offer on my listing. Mike would be your designated buyer's agent and I would be the designated seller's agent. The reason for this designation is that overall the brokerage cannot represent both unless it's dual agency. You have to agree to dual agency. So a designated agent will have all those fiduciary duties, will protect your confidentiality, will give you full disclosure and all those different things. Whereas the overall brokerage, so the top broker, would be considered a facilitator or considered a dual agent. So here's the dual agent section. They can represent both the seller and the buyer in a transaction, but only if there is written consent. So a dual agent should be neutral. They should not be giving any disclosure. They cannot satisfy, it actually says it in here, it cannot satisfy fully the duties of loyalty and disclosure. That's why dual agency gets a little bit sticky and it requires written consent. So I would, if I were in a situation with a client, I typically would recommend doing a designated agency instead of dual agent. So obviously from the examples, you can see that this is a really good disclosure to give some information to the consumer about what they may encounter when they start working with an agent in order to buy or sell their home. And, you know, as I'm explaining this to you, I feel like you might be confused by some of these topics. So I hope that this video helped you understand this disclosure. If you have questions, please put your comments below. I look forward to hearing from you. If you would like, you can schedule a one-on-one orientation with me. I can do it with you in person, or I can do it over a video conference. I usually use Zoom. So you can send me a message at sarah@homewithhuffman.com. That's my email address. I will put it in the comments below. Or you can text me or call me at 413-847-6377. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks again for watching.